This is the GARIS Essays, that is 2-3 page opinion pieces on topics such as species dominance, the global state, politics, femtotech, religion, society and education. Written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. This is essay number 6, entitled "There Will Be No Cyborgs, Only Artilects," a dialogue between Hugo de GARIS and Ben Goertzel. The flyer itself. There will be no cyborgs, only artilects. A dialogue between Hugo de GARIS and Ben Goertzel. The two scientists, Hugo de GARIS and Ben Goertzel, have worked together on artificial brains at Xiamen University in China. They're also good friends and have discussed issues related to the future of AI, technology, humanity, intelligence, and the universe many times. But they don't always see precisely eye to eye. I'm having trouble scrolling, just a minute. Curses. Now, do I stop filming or will it... Nah, it's just going all over the place. Shit, fucking China. That's the trouble living in a third world country. Everything won't function well. Let's see if I can restore this. Stop monologuing. But they don't always see precisely eye to eye. This is one of their many conversations centered on Hugo's notion that the future will be defined and dominated by artilects, vastly superhuman artificial intellects, rather than cyborgs. Can I scroll? I have to use the sidebar. Okay. Ben. That is Ben speaking. Hugo, what exactly do you mean when you say there will be no cyborgs? Hugo. I think I'll say Hugo speaking. My basic point is really simple. There will be no cyborgs in the sense that the computational capacity of a nanotech grain of sand is a quintillion times that of the human brain, making the distinction between a cyborg and a pure artilect pointless. Any human being wishing to convert himself into a cyborg will effectively be killing himself unless he dramatically impairs and restricts the capability of his cyborg portion. He will no longer be he, but an artilect in human disguise. This argument has implications for the species dominance debate. Ben. Okay, so why do you say cyborgization equals death? Hugo. In my media appearances, I often talk about a grain of nanotech sand being added to a newly born baby's brain to convert it into a cyborg. I finally got around to actually calculating just how much greater the computational capacity of that grain of sand would be compared to that of a human brain, assuming classical computing capacities. If one assumes quantum computing capacities, the quantum estimate is astronomically larger. Let's start with some basic assumptions. Let the grain of sand be 1 millimeter cubed, that is 10 to the minus 3 of a meter on a side. Assume the molecules in the sand have a cubic dimension of 1 nanometer on a side, that is 10 to the minus 9 of a meter. Let each molecule consist of 10 atoms for the purposes of a order of magnitude calculation. Assume the grain of sand has been nanoteched such that each atom can switch its state usefully in a femtosecond, that is 10 to the power minus 15 of a second. Assume the computational capacity of the human brain is 10 to the power 16 bits per second, that is 100 billion neurons in the human brain times 10,000, that's the average number of connections between neurons, times 10, the maximum number of bits per second firing rate at each interneuronal or synaptic connection. And that equals 10 to the 11 times 10 to the 4 times 10 to the 1 equals 10 to the power 16. I will now show that the nanotech grain of sand has a total bit switching or computational rate that is a factor of a quintillion, that's a million trillion times larger than the brain's 10 to the power 16 bits per second. How many sand molecules in the cubic millimeter? Answer, a million cubed, that is 10 to the 18, with each of the 10 atoms per molecule switching 10 to the 15 times per second. So a total switching, that's bits per second, rate of 10 to the 18 times 10 to the 15 times 10 to the 1 equals 10 to the power 34. This is 10 to the power 34 divided by 10 to the power 16 equals 10 to the power 18 times greater, that is a million trillion, or a quintillion. Ben. Yes, that's certainly a compelling point. Now I think about it, another interesting calculation is obtained by applying the Bekenstein bound from fundamental physics at the URL is en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Bekenstein, that's capital B EKENSTEIN _ bound, BOUND. You're probably familiar with this, right? Question mark. Related to black hole thermodynamics, this is a bound on the number of bits of information that can possibly be contained in a certain amount of matter, assuming current physics is correct. According to the Bekenstein bound, the number of bits possibly storable in matter comprising a human brain is around 10 to the power 42. Factoring in the smaller diameter and mass of a grain of sand, one decreases this number by a few powers of 10, arriving at an estimate around 10 to the power 35 or so for the sand grain. Compare this to estimates in the range 10 to 13 to 10 to the power 20 for the human brain, based on our current understanding of psychology and neuroscience, and with URL www.merkle, that's merkle.com/human memory, memory spelled with a capital M, that's all one word, humanmemory.html. Of course, a human brain cannot approach the Bekenstein bound without being restructured so as to constitute some very non-human brain-like strange matter. I'm having trouble scrolling. A cyborg combining a human brain with a grain of sand, in quotes, composed of strange matter that approaches the Bekenstein bound would potentially contain 10 to the 35 bits in the femtotech sand grain component and 10 to the 21 bits or so bits in the legacy human brain component. Hugo, right. And this has huge political consequences for the species dominance debate. People like Goertzel, Warwick, etc. claim that there's a third ideological human group in the species dominance debate besides the cosmists, who are the pro-Artilect building, and the Terrans, who are anti-Artilect building, namely the cyborgists, who want to add artilectual components to themselves, thus converting themselves into Artilect gods. They argue that by converting humans into Artilects via the cyborg route, it will be possible to avoid a gigadeath Artilect war between the cosmists and the Terrans, for the simple reason that the human race will have converted itself into Artilects, so there won't be any cosmists or Terrans left, that is, human beings, to wage the war. Everyone will have been upgraded into an Artilect. There's not much point in using the term cyborg, because as the above calculation shows, the human component in the cyborgian brain is only one part in a quintillion, a million trillion, so it can effectively be totally ignored. So really, there is no third ideological group. There are only cosmists, Terrans, and Artilects. Even in the very early days of cyborgian conversion, the vastly superior computational capacities of nanotech matter will make itself felt. The first cyborgs will very quickly become Artilects. Since their bodies would still be human, the Terran paranoia against them would be great. The Terrans would be unable to distinguish a cyborg from a human just by looking at him. Hence all human-looking beings would be suspects. A potential cyborg then needs to consider the fact of the above calculation and become fully conscious that a decision to add the grain of sand, or more, is a decision to commit suicide as a human being. The resulting cyborg is utterly dominated by the artilectural capacity of the sand grain, which totally drowns out the human component, 1 part in a quintillion, and probably vastly more as quantum computing scales up. This means that if a mother cyborgs her baby, she loses her baby. If adult children cyborg themselves, their elderly parents lose their adult children. Thus it is clear that cyborging will be profoundly disruptive to humanity. A large proportion, probably about half, and this needs to be researched more thoroughly. For example, the BBC vote of 2006 and the Coast to Coast radio poll of 2005 of humanity is deeply, viscerally opposed to cyborgism and cosmism, and will go to war to stop both the cosmists from building pure Artilects and the cyborgists from converting themselves into near pure Artilects. They will simply not tolerate becoming an inferior species, with all the enormous risks to the survival of the human species that the rise of the Artilect raises. When I hear cyborgists saying such things as, "I want to become an Artilect god myself by converting myself into an Artilect by adding artilectural components to my brain," I become cynical because I wonder if they realize how enormous the computational capacity of artilected matter is. I sense that too often these cyborgists are ignorant of the phys-comp, that's the physics of computation, calculations applicable to nanotech matter. They need to be made aware that a decision to cyborg themselves is a major one. It means the end of their lives as humans. They would no longer be human, they would be Artilects, which from a human being's point of view is to say that they would be utterly, utterly alien, frightening, and to the Terrans worthy of extermination. I feel that 2011, so this essay is rather old, will be the year that the species dominance debate goes mainstream, at least in the US, where this debate has been led. Ray Kurzweil has recently been featured in a Times magazine article, and I was featured in a History Channel program, Prophets of Doom. There will be several movies in 2011 on the same theme, so the general public will become more exposed to the ideas. If one thinks back 5 years and asks oneself, how conscious was I of the climate change issue? Most people would say, only a little, if at all. I would not be at all surprised that 5 years from now, so 2015, so 2 years ago as I read this at the moment, the issue of species dominance will be part of the educated person's general knowledge as much as is climate change today. After the issue heats up, the species dominance issue will not go away. Every month technical progress is taking humanity closer to being able to build Artilects. The issue will heat up and tempers will flare. Political parties will be formed on the issue. The debate will later start raging, then the assassinations and sabotages will start. People will take sides. The two ideologies, cosmism and Terranism, are both very powerful, that is, building gods versus preserving the human species. Do we build gods or our potential exterminators? And so far have split humanity down the middle. Most individuals are ambivalent about the issue, feeling the awe, that's AWE, of building Artilect gods, as well as feeling the horror of a prospective giga-death Artilect war. Personally, I'm glad I'm alive now. I don't want to see all this horror that's going to consume my grandchildren and billions like them. I just don't want to see it. If I live into my 90s, I will see the species dominance debate rage. It's starting already amongst the AI specialists, but I won't see the war. Thank God. Ben. There's certainly a lot of truth to that, but it seems to me you're overlooking one major point. Some people may want to become cyborgs with a more limited machine component than what is potentially possible. That is, they might choose to be 50% human and 50% machine in terms of computing power, even though it would technically be possible to become 99.99999% machine computationally and only 0.00001% human. This doesn't affect your arguments about species dominance, but it does, IMO, in my opinion. mean there could really be three political groups. A, those wanting only legacy humanity, the Terrans. B, those wanting only limited expansion of human capabilities, e.g. 50-50 human/machine hybrids, the Cyborgists. And C, those wanting expansion without unnecessary limits, the Cosmists. From a cosmist viewpoint, the Cyborgists and Terrans will be basically the same thing. From a Terran viewpoint, the Cyborgists and the Cosmists will be basically the same thing. But to a Cyborgist, the Terrans and Cosmists will seem qualitatively different. Or is your point mainly that once we have the femtotech grains of sand available, they're just going to achieve massive superintelligence so quickly that all the distinctions between inferior intelligence, human-scale beings are going to become totally irrelevant? But don't you think it's possible that the superhuman Artilects may let pesky little humans and cyborgs keep on existing and minding their own business, just as we humans do with ants and bacteria? Hugo. If the artilectual factor is only a million times more, or a billion, or whatever, the qualitative conclusion is the same. That is, the human component has been swamped. So there's little point from the Terran viewpoint in distinguishing between an Artilect and a cyborg. The so-called third option of cyborgism is a phony one. There really are only two options, Terran or Cosmist. The last part of your question is critical in this whole species dominance debate, namely that of risk. That is, the risk that if the Artilects come into being, that they may exterminate humans for whatever reason. I just don't see Globan, that is, world state, Terran politicians around mid-century tolerating the Cosmist's demands to build Artilects. To do so would be to accept that the fate of humanity lies with the Artilects. Humans would become the number 2 species. We would lose control of our own fate. I see the Terran politicians drawing a line in the sand, that is, pushing hard for a globally legislated maximum AIQ, that's artificial intelligence quotient, and anyone superseding it is to become a criminal and be prosecuted. This will force the Cosmists to organize and oppose such a ban. The rhetoric either way will heat up the species dominance debate and spill over into the Artilect war, which with 21st century weapons will lead to gigadeath. And that's it. Ciao. So, Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis, email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com, website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com, and YouTube channel name Hugo de Garis. Ciao.